Peters. Before I recognize Senator Sullivan, I'm going to go over and vote and ask Senator King to continue. Senator Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would appreciate the witnesses being here today. You know, we had a hearing 2 days ago that had a lot of information that we received. I'd like to get your gentlemen's assessment on what is a clear disagreement between the President of the United States assessment of the withdrawal from Afghanistan and his chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The President has referred to this retrograde operation as a, quote, extraordinary success. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs called it a logistical success, strategic failure. I've shown this cover story from the Economist magazine with banner headlines calling it Biden's debacle and going into all these sub-articles about America's standing in the world is significantly diminished. China is enjoying seeing America humbled. These are different articles. What's your gentleman's assessment? Strategically, what that's done to our interests, our credibility, and our...
I think the whole end game, as we discussed, was a debacle. I think it's absolutely hurt American credibility, and really, I think if you're an American ally or partner, you now have to question, how much America is going to come to your defense or stand with you. I think that those are the questions that the Chinese are asking, for example, with Taiwan right now, and with others. So I don't. I think this whole thing absolutely speaks to American weakness, and that's what I'm concerned about long run.
Let me just follow up on that, and then I do want to get our other witnesses' answer to the question. You mentioned weakness. So one thing I've been mentioning to the administration, I worry, and to be quite frank, we've seen it. The Chinese are already saber-rattling with regard to Taiwan openly, right? Kind of in our face, in Taiwan's face. You can't trust the Americans. Here we come. I think other adversaries of ours, Iran, Russia, are going to be testing us, whether Iran and Israel, Russia and the Baltics. Do you agree with that? China, certainly in Taiwan, do you agree with that assessment? And my caution to the administration is better be ready, better be tough. What's your sense on that?
I totally agree. I think we're going to be tested across the board in the coming months and years now. I think we've already been being tested in various ways the last several years, and even if you look at the whole period really from 9/11 on, there's been one test after another. But now I think that we're probably at one of our weakest points, I would say.
Dr. Nasser?
Senator, clearly the end game in Afghanistan has not been our finest moment at various stages. And I think different allies...
But not an extraordinary success.
No, I think the lessons are different for various countries around the world, whether there are allies or there are adversaries. To our allies and adversaries, it looks generally that the United States will tire of its strategies, that it ultimately did not win this war, that ultimately it said it would never talk to the Taliban. It talked to the Taliban, and when it came to the end game, that it didn't manage its own exit well, and there was more damage done on the way out than when we were in. So I think countries are going to look at what it means for them. I would say our enemies may look and say that they can wait out our strategies ultimately. That we can be pushed out of regions of the world if they have the time and the effort. And our allies are really worried as well, because they think that they could be the next President Ghani or the next Afghan military as well.
Yeah. Let me ask one final question, Mr. Chairman, and it's a two-part question. One is more tactical, operational, and then one is strategic as it relates to our allies for both of you. I had the honor of having breakfast with my old boss, Condoleezza Rice, and some of her colleagues at the Hoover Institution, very, very smart foreign policy thinkers. And they were all just mentioning the real strategic aspects of Bagram, where it's located, what you can do with it, keeping it close to China, close to Russia, Central Asia, India, Pakistan. So strategically important. That's now gone, of course. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Chinese or Russians there soon. And then India. I worry about, a growing jihadist sanctuary in Afghanistan will force our growing partnership, which I think has been very important with regard to India, to have to devote greater resources and bandwidth there, as opposed to working with us on addressing what I see as certainly the biggest challenge of the 21st century, which is the rise of the Chinese Communist Party and the export of their authoritarian model around the world. Could you gentlemen quickly, I know I've run out of time, Mr. Chairman, comment on those? Bagram, strategic, India, strategic.
I would say very briefly, Senator, that I always have thought that we should have thought about Afghanistan not just in terms of Al-Qaeda, but also in terms of China. China is not a Pacific power. China is an Asia power, and it's actually moving more and more in West Asia. And we should have looked at Afghanistan as a way of containing China's westward move. But that
Bagram would have certainly helped that.
Bagram would have certainly helped that, yeah.
Any thoughts on India?
I agree with your assessment that the concern when it comes to India now having to deal with a rising jihadi challenge and a distraction from the competition with China. I also agree with what Dr. Nasser said, that there should have been a more holistic look at Afghanistan in terms of the Chinese threat and what's going on in terms of what you're talking about, Bagram and other ways too. I would just say this: we couldn't even get the Al-Qaeda part right in Afghanistan, so I can't really argue we should have done a better job when thinking about China or any of these other issues when we failed on one of our fundamental missions. And that's my main concern here, is that something that should have been narrowly defined and we have a narrow focus on that we really understand, we didn't get right.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.